Welcome to another SGS live webinar, and today's topic is going to be of great interest for many of you as we talk about driving excellence, unveiling the power of APQP4Wind in the wind industry. We'll talk about the needs and challenges of the wind industry, what is APQP4Wind and its role in supply chain excellence, how to deploy APQP4Wind in your organization, and we'll also touch on why long-term supply chain resilience goes beyond training. But first, let me introduce my experts. I'm here today with Soumen, Global Technical Consultant for APQP4Wind at SGS, and Barna Gergely, Global Technical Manager for Supply Chain and Technical Staffing Services at SGS. Hi, Soumen. Hi, Barna. Welcome to the discussion today.
Hello, Daniel.
Hi, Daniel.
Good to see you.
Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. Before we get going, I do have a quick housekeeping announcement. Today, as I've said, I'll be chatting with Soumen and Barna, but there'll also be a couple of poll questions for you to answer during the session. And at the end, we'll have time for a Q&A. So please do participate and add your questions to the Q&A box, and we'll do our best to answer them at the end. You'll also get a certificate of attendance if you watch a minimum of 30 minutes or answer one of our poll questions. But without further ado, let's get started on our discussion today. Let's start with you, Soumen. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, especially related to the wind industry background that you have?
Thank you, Daniel, and having me in this particular event. And I'm actually quite excited, and it's my privilege and honor to share my experiences to this great audience. Just to introduce myself briefly, I would always say I'm a very passionate and quality and operational excellence engineer. I love learning. I always call myself a lifelong learner. But to put the career, I have a 25 years of experience, mostly in the automobile and the wind industry. And when I look back, I always see that I have been toggling between both the industry. For example, I started my career at Tata Motors in the shop floor, working in the shop floor. And from Tata Motors, which is automobile, I switched to GE. And it was the full GE, not the like now we have 3 variants of GE. So I was working with GE, then developing some solutions for the wind turbines and gas turbines. Then from GE, I switched to General Motors, which is automobile, and I was working the warranty and operational excellence. And then back to Vestas, which is wind, and I was working with supplier quality development and the product design. So while at Vestas, I also had the privilege to be the APQP4Wind country ambassador for India, and also I was a working committee member. And presently at SGS, I am the global technical consultant, consulting my clients on the wind solution. I'm looking forward to this particular event, and more details are of course there in the LinkedIn. So thank you very much for having me, Daniel.
Okay, well, thank you for coming. And over to you now, Barna. Let's hear a little bit about you and your professional background.
Good morning, Daniel, and good morning and good afternoon, everyone, those joining us in this debate in this very interesting subject. But before talking about my professional background, please allow me to say just a couple of words about what I'm doing here in SGS. So, as you mentioned, as a global technical manager in the supply chain services, I'm wearing 2 hats. One of the hats is developing technical solutions to support customers in their supply chain related issues, whilst the other one is global service execution and delivery. Now, back to my professional background. So I have over 22 years experience in quality operations and continuous improvement roles, mostly in automotive, aerospace, and rail, but also in some other industries, where I used extensively the APQP principles and methodologies with customers such as Nissan, BMW, Toyota, Boeing, Rolls-Royce, and I can go on and on with the list. In all these companies where I attended APQP, sitting on both sides of the table, both as customer and supplier, so suffering and not, I've seen different type of projects, from very simple like the Village liner for the Nissan Qashqai to full 7 tons power packs for the trains. In terms of wind and renewable energy, here in SGS, I'm working with big utility companies, OEMs, and their suppliers in different supply chain solutions such as inspection, expediting, supplier development activities, including APQP4Wind as well. So this is about me in a nutshell, and I hope that we will have a nice discussions today. Thank you.
Thank you, Barna. Well, it seems like I'm in very safe hands with you two, so that's great. Now, for the audience who may be new to APQP4Wind, can you explain exactly what that is?
It's a good point, Daniel. It's a very good point to start with. And before going into details to explain the process of APQP4Wind, we need to understand APQP4Wind as organization. So APQP4Wind, it's a non-profit organization founded by world leader wind turbine manufacturer, OEMs, and their suppliers in supporting the supply chain in ongoing quality issues, mainly. So this is in a nutshell. But if you are taking one step back, APQP4Wind as an organization, all the idea started in 2014 when all the quality network met with Siemens, Vestas, and Siemens Gamesa, Vestas, and GE's supply chain in discussing quality-related aspects. So the mission of APQP4Wind as an organization, it's basically is to provide standards, tools, and methodologies in APQP in various APQP methodologies that it's founded the actual standard today. Also, APQP4Wind is having the other mission to enable the collaboration between the wind industry network, making sure that companies, stakeholders within the network got access to project management, training, and the various tools for this one, so they can work towards continuous improvement and customer satisfaction.
Okay, can you tell us a little bit? Can you tell us a little bit more about the standard? What exactly does it entail, and how can we understand it in the simplest way? Obviously, very simple for me.
Sure. So now we understood APQP4Wind as an organization. So let's understand APQP4Wind as standard. So those that are not familiar with APQP, it means it's coming from the acronym Advanced Product Quality Planning. So we are talking about the quality planning, a quality project management, where for its meanings for someone, and this someone is the wind, which is the wind industry. So APQP4Wind is basically the advanced product quality planning for wind industry. Now, this standard, this process has been developed, as I mentioned, mostly for wind and very, very specifically for wind. And if I'm coming to explain this in a very simplistic terms, the purpose of APQP4Wind is to ensure that everything that we are willing to introduce into to the design and building of the wind turbines, basically it's hitting the right quality quality levels, and this in on time, and of course it's within the budget. And all these characteristics will be maintained during the mass production of the parts. Now, as a process, APQP is one of the most effective and efficient process to introduce new parts into the system. So absolutely. If you're taking the benefits of APQP4Wind, so following APQP4Wind, organizations will have a flow, will adopt requirements and will have an agreement from day one, and then it will have control changes, and they have an overall customer satisfaction. So here is a simple example. If you have a wind turbine, manufacturer that require a transformer from an existing or a new supplier, but this transformer is coming with a completely different characteristics, the wind transformer, the transformer organization, manufacturer organization will say that okay, do that, been there. So why not doing this in the same level? Whilst if you are following APQP4Wind, then it's making sure that everything it will be on as the customer required. All parameters will be followed through the planning phase till the mass manufacturing.
Okay, that sounds good. I think I understand it now, so that's good. But obviously, we've got a lot more to investigate. But I'd like to take a moment now to get our audience involved. As I said, I'm going to have a couple of questions that I'd like to bring into the mix. And you'll be able to see the first question on your screen now, which I'll read out because that's my job, is to read things out. Are you using APQP4Wind standard? You can choose A, yes, I've just started. B, yes, I'm quite experienced. And C, no, I use the ISO standards. So if you can click on one or other of those, and while we're waiting for you to answer those, and we'll come back to that question in a moment, I'd like to go over to you, Soumen, and talk about APQP is already standard in some industries. Is it any different in the wind industry? Soumen, you mentioned that you have a lot of experience in the automotive sector. What's the difference between APQP4Wind and the automotive APQP standard, for example?
Yeah, so coming from both the industry, of course, this question, I'm very fond to handle this question. It is indeed a very popular question and also reasonable question because after all, automobile industry is into the business for a longer time, so valid question to ask. So as Barna explained, APQP4Wind is nothing but a product development quality planning methodology. And every company, right, be it automobile or be it turbine or be it healthcare, every company will have a product development, a stage gate process to develop a product. So, but that is where the similarity ends. That is where the similarity ends between automobile, which is a particular kind of product, and a turbine, which is like a tall pedestal structure. So imagine for a second the automobile, and I'm talking about a vehicle, a personal car. The car is not just an engine product, right? It is also an emotional product. People often say that car is an extension of one's personalities. So imagine from a voice of customer point of view, so there will be various specifications which will be quite different from that of the wind industry. There will be a lot of non-functional specification, the curve, the finish, small things matters when it comes to automobile. And that I would say the voice of customer is quite different when it comes to wind compared to automobile. The other thing that we need to understand, because we are talking about why the difference and what are the difference, look from the customer order penetration point. At what time of the supply chain customer gets engaged? And in automobile, it is usually a make to stock. So the manufacturer will make the turbine and give it to the dealer, and dealer will sell. And at that point, customer engages. Compare that to wind, and wind is typically make to order. The customer orders the turbine, gives enough time to the manufacturer to go through the development cycle, to manage its delivery, and then you deliver. So even the nature of the supply chain is different. The other big difference why this standard is necessitated is automobile by the nature is mass manufacture. So getting those 300 samples to establish process capability, to measure the stability is quite easy. 300 parts is nothing, right, in an automobile world. But in a wind industry, apart from the big parts, it is making 8 to 15 per week. So very small, establishing process capability is extremely difficult. And last but not the least, the way inspection are carried out in automobile. Automobile is mostly because of nature of automation, because it is in use for longer period. The number of online inspection, the automation is quite huge. So measurement data is easily available in an automobile world. And compared to that of the wind world, in which there are still a lot of visual inspection. So even the inspection standard, the measurement system analysis is quite different. So in a nutshell, what I'm trying to articulate is the supply chain risk, the complexities involved are hugely different between these two industries. And that is why, as Barna mentioned, the leaders came together. They thought that copy pasting automotive standards is not going to work well. So they came out with a standard which is specifically addressing the needs of the wind industry. And that's why this difference has occurred or has come.
Okay, no, that's great. Let's have a look now to see what our audience has answered to the question, so we can see who's been involved. So at the moment, actually, we're talking to quite a young audience in terms of APQP4Wind. Only 10% have just started using it. nobody who's watching is quite experienced, so I'm guessing they're going to learn a lot from today, and everyone else is using the ISO standards. So that's quite interesting. Is that what you would have expected, Soumen and Barna, or would you have expected a few more people to be using APQP for wind?
Yes, to be honest. Go ahead, Soumen.
Yeah. So yeah, quickly, it is absolutely matching my intuition. And, these are some of the barriers that one needs to navigate through once we implement. So maybe we will touch upon the topic, but completely it is, like very intuitive to get this kind of survey responses. Over to you, Barna.
Sure, this is what we see also talking with different type of customers, that some of them already started some elements, but nobody can say that they are experienced or experts in APQP4Wind in the real world.
All right, that's good. Well, maybe if we came back in 6 months after everyone's watched this webinar, those answers would be quite different, I would hope.
And that's a big hope, yeah. So I'll be happy to see that number swing to the other side.
Yeah. Okay. Now, organizations are already grappling with many standards. As we've seen, a lot of people are using ISO, environmental standards, safety standards, and quality standards, such as ISO 9001. Why do we need another one? And maybe the answers to that poll would indicate that a lot of the people watching don't think we do. So, Barna, why do we need another standard?
So let's start with what is a standard. So as we know that the starting point of all process improvement is standardization. If you don't have a standard process, if you don't have a stable process, we cannot do any process improvement. So let's start. This is why standard. Then the second topic, as technically already Soumen touched base, that was the difference between APQP for automotives, APQP for wind. So APQP for wind, it's coming to help the organization within the wind industry. So it is very, very specific. Whilst the APQP for automotive or APQP for aerospace, as was mentioned earlier, that was built specifically for those industries. What I like in APQP for wind as standard, that it's coming with a complete different design. It's coming with a seven phase design. Each phase got its very nice description, inputs and outputs for each phase, and for outputs for phase one, it's basically its inputs for the phase two, and etc. And because we are talking about these phases, let me tell you my personal experience and personal preferences. So my favorite part is, of course, is phase one, is basically the plan design defined scope, where it is very important to define from day one all the requirements, making sure that everything is set up from day one. Honestly, I've seen many companies with great projects falling because this phase wasn't respected or wasn't followed through completely. So APQP4Wind, it's coming as a standard and describing very nicely this phase and offering all the support that required, even in the standard, and then connecting the standard to the workbook.
Right, so that's really interesting. That's really interesting, Barna. Do you have anything to add to that, Soumen, about why we do need another standard?
First of all, I resonate quite well with what Barna said. Absolutely agree with that. So maybe a few other things just to extend the discussion. So Barna already mentioned that APQP for wind was founded in 14 and it became an independent organization in 18. So that goes back to say that every company has their own stage gate product development standard. We just saw in the survey ISO 9000 something. In fact, when I talk to people, they say, I have ISO 9000, why I need more? And of course, I will share more on that. And then there are contracts. So they have their stage gate process, they have their contracts, and they have ISO 9000. But what is happening in reality? Look at the media. Okay, so like the wind magazines that bring news, of course, we know not everything will get reported in the media, but whatever get reported, from that you can easily gauge that something is not working right. The quality issues continues to haunt the industry. There are late discovery issues, the blades are falling, noise levels are going up, and this is leading to increased scope queue, increased liquidated damages, increased warranty provisioning, and plummeting margins, right? A lot of companies are in the red, or they're just slowly getting there in the black zone. So which means whatever have brought them here will not take them there. Something is not going right, right? So that is why I would say that APQP for wind is like a collective wisdom of what went well, what went wrong. I always say that any company like ourselves, any company will not have enough time to learn from the product failure mistakes of their own. So it is always wise, it is always clever to learn from mistakes of others. And APQP for wind gives that wonderful opportunity because it is like an amalgamation of all the best practices or all the lessons learned that has happened. So it is wise, it is highly imperative for the wind industry to adopt APQP for wind, because once you adopt, the probability of the leak, probability of the quality issues getting leaked into the next stages or getting detected at the hands of customer will be minimized. So I am a big advocate of APQP for wind. I gave enough reason why companies should use it, and that would be my justification.
Thank you for that, Soumen. You mentioned there about the finances, and maybe Barna can go a little further on that. How can organisations measure the return on investment from the money that they put into APQP for wind, and what's the business case for implementing it?
It's a very interesting and very important question, but Daniel, let me put this in a different way. So what's the return of investment if we are not implementing APQP for wind in the wind industries? So as we mentioned and we discussed earlier, everything is about the mistakes, everything is about quality improvement, how process improvement, standardization. So APQP for wind as an organization, just to repeating myself again, I apologize for it, was built to support organization in their continuous improvement due to ongoing quality issues in the wind industry. So if you are taking one of the return of investment, if you are not implementing APQP for wind, is basically the cost of failure, the warranty, the cost of warranty, the warranty provision. This is one. From my experience, another can be, for example, the cost of supplier quality that is booked in. Then the other one, it can be the cost of rights. But this is just my takes in this point. So maybe you can detail a little bit more from your point of view.
So I would say again, like completely align with what you're saying. The other thing that I would say is the way the wind industry is solving the problems. So they are actually having more of a reactive approach or the quality control approach. That means they're putting more and more quality inspectors, right? So if the thickness of the quality control wall is say X, they're putting more and more resources to increase the thickness. What does it mean? It means the defect has already occurred, and I'm putting a lot of resources to make sure that defect doesn't go into the customer. But that is not what we want. We want that defect should not happen by itself. So the amount of rework that the current industry does, the amount of scrap, as you mentioned, the freight, the express freight that the company does, if we see those costs gradually reducing over time, that can be a very good measure of ROI as well.
Okay, no, that's really good. I'd like to bring our audience back in at this point. We have a second poll question for them, which is going to appear on the screen any moment now. There we go. Okay, so what is the biggest challenge for you when it comes to implementing APQP for wind? Now, as we know, only about 10% of our audience have actually started using APQP for wind. So it's going to be quite a small sample size, but let's see what they say. So A, knowing where to start and where to go. I mean, it might be that the 90% who haven't got APQP for wind will probably tick that because they just don't know how to begin. The second option is getting leadership on board. And finally, clearly articulating APQP for wind to key stakeholders. So if our audience can have a little think about those questions and tick the one that most applies to them. While we're waiting for that, Soumen, maybe you can answer this question. How can we measure whether APQP for wind has been successfully implemented?
So that is a tough question, but again, a good question to ask, because when we say ROI is easy to measure. That is a science part, right? And engineers like measurements. I love measuring. But imagine the measurement that really matters, right? They are often very difficult to measure. How do we measure increased accountability, which APQP for Wind advocates? Or how do we measure increased motivation, increased transparency? So these are some of the things, we have to take into mind when we do that. I recall there was a case in which there was a product development and the current supplier was unable to supply the particular material. So this local company, they identified an alternate supplier. They quickly got an alternate product and introduced the product. Now, at a future date, when this particular technology was getting transferred to another country, at that time they discovered that the BOM was not updated, the specification was not updated, and imagine the kind of hassle, the kind of accountability issue, blame game that happened, completely, against the spirit of APQP for Wind. So I will say, if APQP for Wind is successfully implemented in any company, there will be always a healthy tension, not an unhealthy tension. There's a healthy tension between the need for speed, because one needs to have a speed to take it to the market, and also the need for documentation. The need for speed and need for documentation cannot be either or. Okay, so in a good organization where it is successfully implemented, these are some of the ways we can measure how well it is working.
Right. Okay. And let's have a look now what our audience has said in terms of what's the biggest challenge for them. So probably, as we could have predicted, I guess, Soumen, 62% of put knowing where to start and where to go. So that's probably why they've tuned in today. Getting leadership on board, because obviously you need people to take it forward, and clearly articulating the value of APQP for Wind to key stakeholders. Again, is that the sort of balance of answers that you would have expected?
Barna?
Yes, definitely. So definitely this. Sorry, yeah. So definitely, I'm just also looking for the score. So definitely, this is what we are seeing, and hopefully, I can answer also for the question that know to where to start and where to go, in case if you wish to implement APQP for Wind.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
and
that's great.
Daniel, just to add, it actually tells me that whenever I'm starting my journey, first I have to put my Google map, right? I should know where I will be going. Then only I'm confident, then I'm assured that I will go at the right place. As I say, any road will lead you there because you do not know where to go. So, it completely makes sense. And of course, we can delve into that topic later.
Yeah, it's interesting that you should mention Google Map, because I think it's also important not just to know where you're going, but where you are at the moment, where you're starting from.
Absolutely. Right. Your location, right? There is a Google option, your location.
Yeah, if you don't know where you are at the moment, then you don't know really which way to go to actually get started.
Absolutely.
So let's move on to my next question. How long does it take to actually deploy APQP for Wind? What kind of time commitment does it require? I think that's maybe Barna is a question for you.
Yeah, sure. So generally, a new product development project takes between 3 to 12 months. Depends on the product, of course. But when we are talking about APQP for Wind, we need to consider some very important factors. And I will start with the most important factor, which is the training. So what we notice that organizations where they have the people trained, the key employees trained within APQP for Wind specialist and management awareness training, the implementation of the process will go faster because those people know what they have to do. Whilst organizations where they just getting on the board to implement APQP for Wind and they not been trained yet, or just getting to be enrolled for trainings, of course, the implementation will go much slower. Another aspect, what we need to take in consideration is the organizational maturity. What we notice that big organizations where we have a full process stability, full development, and then we have an organizational chart, project management that is looking after this kind of new product implementation. We see that, of course, something is going more naturally than organizations that are just still getting their feet into that step. While I would say the third one, it's about the product itself. Of course, let's take, for example, the complexity of the product of a transformer versus a tower clip. Both of them are highly critical, but by design and by subcomponents, the transformer it's much more complex. So to implement APQP4Wind for a new transformer, of course, timing will take much longer than for the anchor point. So this is another one. Then what I would tell it's another aspect is, of course, the type of company that is doing, the type of that is, if we are talking about a build to print or build to spec. Well, before we are going in that one, just for those that are not familiar with the terms, build to print are those organizations where are receiving the specification and the design from the customer. So of course, these companies won't need to lose time discussing about design, developing the design, validating the design, and a lot of arguing with the customer about some key design aspects. So basically the phase 1 and phase 2, it will go much smoother for these companies. Then we are discussing about build to spec. So these companies own the design. These companies need to design the product itself. So of course, then in this case, the entire APQP4Wind implementation will be much longer. Last but not least, budget. Companies that are well-budgeted organizations that have secured a good budget from day one, and they counted everything in, and they have also some percentage, some margin on top of it. Of course, implementation will go much faster than companies that, let's say, miss a couple of elements. Let's take in consideration companies that are using tools. And for some reason, we forget from the budget, the tooling. For those companies, of course, they have to go back, they have to renegotiate the entire project, or even to cut from their own win from this project. So these are the factors that we need to consider when we wish to implement APQP4Wind, and we wish to calculate how long will take the full project.
Yeah.
So
and
maybe
you mentioned, oh, sorry, Soumen.
No, just to extend, Barna, because you mentioned that money or budget is important. It reminds me that if APQP4Wind is a vehicle that will take us from point A to point B, the vehicle still needs fuel, right? And the budget or money is the fuel, right? Without fuel, a good vehicle will not drive. So I just thought I can allude to that example.
Yeah, no, that's obviously coming from your experience in the automotive industry. You definitely know that cars need fuel, which is good to know. Now we talked about we talked about training programs there. How does the training work? How long were the courses, and did the participants get a certificate at the end? I think that's probably for you, Soumen.
Yeah, so training is a part of the competency building, because you have to drive, but you also need to get a license, or you need to get a trained on the nuances. So there are a lot of trainings. You can go to the APQP4Wind website and see it. But broadly, there are two good trainings or critical trainings. One is the specialist training, which is of the duration of 32 hours, spread across 4 days. And these are meant for people who actually are implementers, those at the shop floor, developing products, doing the analysis, data collection, and things like that. And then there is another kind of training, which is a management awareness training, which is an 8 hours training and is a 1-day format. And these are for the leaders, the people who will allocate budget, as Barna was saying, the enabler kind of guy, and they need to be also onboarded to this training. End of this training, both the format, there will be a small quiz or test, online test, and then once you pass, you get a certificate issued directly from the APQP4Wind organization, which is valid for a period of 4 years. So I hope that answers the question.
Okay, no, that's great. And are the training programs online or offline?
So APQP4Wind, to the best of my knowledge, doesn't prescribe one over the other. But COVID, as we know, showed that online can be as effective as offline, like we are having online format now. So I would say that when the participants are mixed from a different time zone or different companies, it is better to go for an online format because of the simplicity of the logistics. But when we have one OEM or one OEM who has brought all the suppliers under its roof, then in that case, it is always better to have a classroom format. Of course, there is a cost implication when it is a classroom based. So that would be my response.
Okay, no, that's good. Now, if you have just joined us, we're talking about APQP4Wind and its importance in the wind industry today. I'm speaking with Soumen and Barna Gergely, the experts from SGS. There'll be a chance for you to ask your own questions in a short time during our Q&A, which will take place following the conversation. So please put your questions in the Q&A section on the screen. And I'd also like to invite you to complete our 1-minute survey, which you can see on your screen as well. For now, though, it's back to my questions. We've been hearing about APQP4Wind for OEMs and suppliers. However, we also have the wind utility companies and the wind developers who are sitting at the top of the supply chain. Do you think they'll also benefit from the standard?
Absolutely, and I think thanks for asking, because they are the top of the supply chain and they were not there in the whole game so now. So when we look at utility and developers, in some sense, they are the end users. Of course, we are the end user, we consume electricity, but from that sense, they are also the end user because they consume the turbines that the OEMs and suppliers have provided. So recognizing their requirement, the APQP4Wind, they extended the scope of the standards to cover them. So during March 2024, APQP4Wind released version 1.3, and it encompassed, or it brought them into the umbrella. So at a macro level, when we look at these developers, apart from the profit ROI, of course, they are legitimate requirements. They also need to make sure that they erect and commission the turbines by de-risking the supply chain, right? So that is their goal. That is the overriding goal, which means they need to make sure not only the turbines from the OEMs, but also the other things like the foundation structures, the cables, substations, SCADA, transportation, tools, all the other things have to also come together on time and with quality, besides also meeting the regulatory and the safety requirements. So they have equal challenge to manage their supply chain risk. So means that the quality assurance and the risk management standards that APQP4Wind provides for the manufacturers and suppliers are equally applicable to the utility and developers. I would say, and that's why they have brought, and it is actually a welcome news for them. So I wholeheartedly recommend utility and developer use them, and we saw the adoption rate in the survey. Adoption, to my knowledge, is still at a nascent stage, and I can foresee more and more utility companies will slowly get the benefit of APQP, understand the benefit of APQP, and embrace to manage their supply chain risk. So it is coming for sure.
Okay, that's great. And we know that you've been working in the wind industry for a long time, Soumen, and been advocating for APQP4Wind for a long time. From your experience, what lessons have you learned about deploying the standard in different organizations? Or maybe what are the barriers for successful implementation?
Yeah, so coming directly from an experience, and I have faced it first time, so I can really share what has happened. Just to give you a quick background, I had told in the introduction, I was also the APQP4Wind country ambassador and also the working committee member. So in the working committee, we did discuss, like that this is not right, that is not right. So we could hear, how users of APQP perceives this APQP. But, like if you have to talk about lessons learned and implementation, I would say it also has to be packaged very well, right? If APQP is a product, we know the packaging has to be also as important as the product. How the leadership team, how the APQP champions takes this particular APQP and rolls it out to all the operators or all to the implementers is absolutely important. Because if you don't do what happens, and I have listened to it multiple times, they'll say, Soumen, this is very good. I really endorse the standard, everything. But you know what? I have a fire burning in my backyard, and that is more important in my mind. So let me, let me douse that fire today, and I will do it tomorrow. And the tomorrow never comes. So they are in a perpetual firefighting mode, and they are never able to embrace the whole thing. So this has to be packaged very well. So how do leaders package it very well? Leaders will package it very well if they themselves get trained. And that's why this format of APQP4Wind management training. So let them come here. They should not read a PPT or they should not read a manual, put it on the folders and read it tomorrow. They should come, spend that 8 hours, understand the essence of APQP4Wind, and then only they can take home the message. And the last one is, when we roll out the APQP4Wind, we should be very much aware, very much careful that people don't perceive APQP4Wind as an additional process. They should not think it is a burden. It is a new documentation need or something. So we should say, and also APQP4Wind advocates that these practices should be part of the existing management system. And last one, I am oversimplifying it. Suppose the existing system doesn't have, say, a capacity assessment as one of the things that the company needs to do, or a contingency planning that the company needs to do. So we have to go back and do this one and make it a part of the existing process. So it is like an add-on. It should not be perceived as a different one. If you do this, then the barriers to entry, the barriers to acceptance are reduced, and APQP4Wind can be successfully implemented.
All right. No, thank you for that. Barna, do you have anything to add in terms of what role does leadership play in the successful adoption of APQP4Wind in any organization?
Sure. So as Soumen already touched base with regards the leadership role, so APQP4Wind implementation can be looked as a change management process. So as any change in any organization, there's a need for a strong leadership. There is a need for personal example to lead this change. If you don't have the correct leadership, if you don't have the personal example, you won't achieve this change within your organization. So, and another aspect is, if talking about leadership or talking about management in APQP4Wind, as in any project, it needs a manning, it needs a budgeting, as we discussed earlier, correct? And then all these aspects need to be led, need to be cascaded and delegated to making sure. However, APQP4Wind is a quality standard. Quality cannot be delegated fully. Quality can be adopted as a team and can be owned and implemented correctly. So let me give an example just to understand a little bit better from my experience, that what I seen, one of the best examples. It was back in the period when I was working in the rail industry, in Hitachi Rail, and was working with one of our suppliers to developing the power pack for the trains. So what we noticed there, that the entire APQP project was led by the operations director. The operations director opened the meeting and started with his own tasks. And then it was cascaded down from managers to operator levels, the entire project for each phases. Well, this was an example that I really liked, and I know that it's maybe not from the wind industry, but it's a very good example in taking consideration leadership and how to lead this kind of projects.
Right. Okay. And there are a number of OEMs and suppliers that are already involved in APQP4Wind processes. What kind of support can SGS give to these companies to help them make progress in their supply chain?
That's a very good point. To be honest, we discussed with many utilities, OEMs, and their suppliers in the wind industry, and we've got kind of same answer that we've got today from the post. So people been there, do that, they did some trainings, they purchased the manuals, they start to using the workbook, but somehow they cannot connect the dots. Somehow they cannot see from where to start and where to end, as it was discussed earlier. So SGS, it's coming to support these companies connecting the dots, starting with the right point and going through to connect the trainings, the implementation phase, the validation phase, and of course, making sure that all the deliverables are correctly filled into the APQP4Wind workbook. If you wish to know, and if you wish to understand more, please get in touch with us.
That's great. I'll be giving out an email address at the end for people to get in touch with us. So that's really useful. Now, look, it's been a really interesting discussion today. Thank you, Barna and Soumen, for sharing your expertise, and thank you to the audience for joining us. Now, I know both Soumen and Barna are happy to answer questions from the audience, which have been coming in our Q&A box. So before I get on to those questions, if I can just remind you all to fill out our quick survey, which will be on your screen. It's on the right-hand side of the screen. Let me have a look at the audience questions. This is sort of related to the last question that I asked, which is maybe why it came in. What is the working process if I want to implement APQP4Wind with SGS? I'm not sure who's best to answer that, Barna or Soumen, whoever wants to take that.
I can pick up this question. Yes, sure. I can pick up this question. Thank you both. So if you wish that SGS to support you in your APQP4Wind journey, then the first thing is to just send us an email. And as Daniel mentioned, there will be an email address where you can get in touch. Then we will have discussions just to understand where you are at, what's your weaknesses, or what's your needs that need to be addressed within APQP4Wind. Then we are following the assessment process as is prescribed by APQP4Wind, and from there we take the next steps to see that where we can go, and of course supporting with implementation, and after the implementation supporting with validation process. So this is the working process with us.
Lovely. You mentioned weaknesses there. I like to call them opportunities for improvement.
Absolutely, and you're absolutely right. Not weaknesses, because we don't have weaknesses. We have just opportunities for improvement.
Now, here's next question from the audience. How can my company become a member of the APQP4Wind organization? That's probably one for Soumen, I think.
Yeah, so I can take that. To become APQP4Wind member, of course, as you know, we are an accredited partner of APQP4Wind. So if you have to become a member of APQP4Wind, details are in the website, but let me summarize. The prerequisite is your company needs to have at least one management awareness trained and one specialist. And then there is a training fees, which depends on the size of the organization. It can vary anywhere between 1K euro to 5,000 €5,000 per year, depending on the size of the organization. So it is very easy. Get in touch with APQP4Wind. There are people in the secretariat. They will help you become a member.
Okay, that's great. And the next question that's coming, if someone leaves the present organization, will the APQP4Wind certificate still remain valid?
So, Matt, do you want to go for this one? Okay, I can take this one, no problem. Sure. So if someone, it's the same with any certificate. So what we need to do a step back and just ask ourselves, do we wish to have a trained employees, or do we want just to keep for ourselves and see what's happening? One of the basic principles of the management is to train people, because if we are training people, our costs will go down. So yes, people are coming and leaving, but this is organization, and each organization need to take some risks. So whether if we are going to lose people or keeping people, it's depending on us how organization can retain people. This is the nature of the business, I'm afraid.
And just I'd like to, and the other thing, maybe it was maybe a part of the question was, yes, if you leave the organization, the certificate is issued in your name, the person who has taken the training and got passed. So you can carry the certificate, and it is valid for the period of 4 years. So you carry it with you. It is not assigned to a company. It is assigned to the individual who has undergone this training and fulfilled the requirements of the test.
Correct. Okay, thank you so much for completing me.
And just to clarify for me, so I understand it. The certificate is for the individual. It's you don't get a certificate for the organization.
True. ISO 9000, again, the popular choice is for the organization. APQP4Wind is for the individual.
Okay, and you mentioned there, Soumen, that the certificate has a 4-year valid date. What happens at the end of those 4 years? Would you redo the training?
So I think that is a great question, because there's a cost, and you invest time, you invest money for the certificate. So what happens end of 4 years? So one of the reason why the certificate needs to see, we could have issued the APQP4Wind could have issued the certificate forever, but realize the lessons learned, right? As I was talking, the lessons learned keep on coming because we discover new things. So the standards also keeps on changing, right? And even the scope changes. For example, in March 2014, 2024, the scope got expanded to utilities. So to consider these changes, APQP4Wind mandates that it has to be renewed, and the process to renew is before 6 months from the expiry date and after 3 months from the expiry date, you have to go for a refresher training from one of the service trainer partners. And once you go through the refresher training, your certificate will be renewed. And if you are not able to get the refresher training in that -6 plus 4 months window, then on a case-by-case basis, you can reach out to APQP4Wind and they can give you some deviation.
Okay, that's great. I've just got 2 more questions left from the audience, and then we'll have to call it a day. Will it be possible to get the APQP4Wind manual without undergoing the training?
Yes, it's possible. The way it is designed, so the requester has to reach out to one of the training partners, and we are one of the training partners, so we can procure the manual on behalf of the requester. But again, as I recommended, nobody can learn swimming by just reading a document. Nobody can learn a piano by reading a document. So I will not recommend just taking a manual and learning. So you need to go through the training process, because the training process are designed in such a way that each and element of the clause is discussed. There are case studies, there are active discussion, then only inculcate. So yes, to answer the question, manual can be procured irrespective of the training. Manual should be procured from one of the training providers, training partners like us. There are other training partners as well, and it is, of course, possible.
Yeah, no, it's going back to your automotive experience. You're not going to be able to drive a car by reading the highway code, I wouldn't think. Final question from our audience, and we might know this from the poll earlier, but it might be different overall. What is the rate of adoption of APQP4Wind in the industry?
So I will take this question because it's a very interesting question. So we can take this in from 2 angles. One of the angle is basically that about the organization that are enrolled to APQP4Wind website. And if you are going to APQP4Wind website, we will notice that most of the OEMs adopted what we are having there. Most of the OEMs adopted the APQP4Wind, and basically they are requesting the supply chain to implement it. And then we have a vast majority of the strong supply chain of these OEMs. And now we're starting to see some increased number of the utility companies as well. So this is the angle of the companies that are on APQP4Wind website. The other angle that we can take is the implementation of the APQP, how companies adopted APQP4Wind. And our audience already told us that about 60% they start to do something, but they still don't know that in which way to go, where to start, where to end, how to connect the dots, where to go for more information. So
yeah,
hopefully this answers this question.
If I may add, Daniel, to Barna's point of view. We already saw from the survey, a lot of companies are still on the fence, trying to watch whether they should adopt it or not. So it comes back to what we popularly say, right? It is a must-have or it is a nice-to-have. So maybe for the big OEMs, they have already done that. You go to the website, you can see the supplier manual. In fact, the big companies, what they're doing, they are through a contractual clause, they're asking their supplier to become APQP4Wind compliant. So that is how they're driving. So they have really understood the benefits of APQP. But for others, they are still on the fence. They're thinking that should I adopt or not? And we say today's good to have will become tomorrow's must have, because the reality is still there. Quality issues are coming, late discovery issues are coming. So an ISO 9000 is not sufficient to address those issues, because ISO 9000 designed for something else. Is a quality management system. So I think with time it will adopt. I think, and that is the reason we are having this webinar, in which we are spreading the awareness of the benefit of APQP4Wind, so more and more people understand the power of APQP4Wind in driving excellence.
Thank you for that. And I think you've explained it very well today. So it really has been an insightful discussion, but we are going to have to stop things there. I'd like to thank Soumen and Barna for joining me today. They're our APQP4Wind experts at SGS, so thank you both very much. If you do have any questions or require additional information, you can reach out by leaving your info in the survey or contacting our team at the following email address: industries.environment@sgs.com. That has come up on the screen. I'd like to thank you all very much for watching. My name is Daniel Tatarsky. Goodbye for now.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.